The September sun was setting behind the old courthouse, painting the downtown square in shades of orange and gold. Jasmine Richardson checked her watch as she walked down the marble steps, her briefcase heavy with case files. It had been another long day in court, the kind that left her shoulders tense and her mind exhausted. But there was also satisfaction there deep in her chest. She'd just won a discrimination case for a family who'd been denied housing. And moments like these reminded her why she'd become a civil rights attorney in the first place. The evening air felt good against her skin after being stuck in that stuffy courtroom all day. She loosened her collar slightly and adjusted the strap of her briefcase. Her car was parked 3 blocks away, and normally she'd take the shortcut through the alley behind Main Street. But something about the golden light made her want to walk through the square instead. Past the fountain where families were gathered, past the old oak trees that had witnessed 100 years of this city's history. Jasmine was wearing her favorite navy blue suit, with a matching skirt that fell just below her knees. Professional, confident, appropriate. She'd learned early in her career that appearance mattered in a courtroom, that people made judgments before you even opened your mouth. It was exhausting sometimes, always having to be twice as good, twice as prepared, twice as careful. But she'd made peace with it years ago. This was the price of doing work that mattered. She was thinking about stopping by the corner store for some milk when she noticed the patrol car parked near the fountain. 2 officers were leaning against it, talking and laughing about something. Jasmine felt that familiar tightening in her stomach, that awareness that came from being a black woman in America. Not fear exactly, but a heightened alertness, a mental checklist running automatically. Stay calm, be polite. Don't give them any reason. She hated that these thoughts were automatic, that they'd been programmed into her since childhood. She kept walking, her heels clicking steadily on the pavement. Just keep going. You're fine. You haven't done anything wrong. You're just walking home. Hey there, one of the officers called out. Jasmine's heart rate picked up, but she kept her face neutral. She turned toward them with a polite smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of dealing with difficult judges and hostile opposing counsel. Good evening, officers. The taller one pushed off from the patrol car. His nameplate read Donovan. He had that swagger some men get when they have a badge and a gun, like the world owes them something. That's a nice suit you got there. You a lawyer or something? I am, actually, Jasmine replied, keeping her tone pleasant but not warm. I was just heading home from the courthouse. The second officer, shorter but stockier with Collins on his nameplate, grinned. A lawyer, huh? You must think you're pretty important. There it was, that edge in his voice, that subtle mockery. Jasmine had heard it 1,000 times before. She took a breath and maintained her composure. Just doing my job, officers. Have a good evening. She turned to continue walking, every instinct telling her to just get away from this situation. But Donovan's voice stopped her again. Hold on a second. We didn't say you could go. Jasmine turned back, and now her legal training kicked in fully. Am I being detained for something, officer? Donovan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No, nothing like that. Just being friendly, making conversation. You got a problem with that? Not at all, Jasmine said carefully. I just have somewhere to be. Collins moved closer, circling around to her side like they were closing in. The fountain behind them seemed louder now, or maybe everything else had just gotten quieter. Jasmine noticed that the families who'd been sitting nearby had started to drift away. People always knew when to make themselves scarce. You know, you lawyers are all the same, Collins said, his voice carrying that same mocking tone. Think you're better than everyone else. Think the rules don't apply to you. Jasmine's grip tightened on her briefcase handle. Stay calm, don't escalate. I don't think I'm better than anyone, officer. I just believe in the law and in treating people fairly. Oh, you believe in treating people fairly? Donovan laughed, and there was something mean in it. That's rich. I bet you're one of those lawyers who goes around suing police officers, aren't you? Making up stories about brutality and misconduct? The accusation stung because it was partially true. She did take cases involving police misconduct when they came to her, when families needed someone to stand up for them against a system that seemed designed to protect its own. But she didn't make up stories. She dealt in facts and evidence and justice. I represent clients who need legal assistance, Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the anxiety building in her chest. That's what lawyers do. Yeah, well, maybe someone needs to teach you some respect, Collins muttered. The air felt different now, charged with something ugly. Jasmine could feel sweat starting to form on her back despite the cooling evening air. She glanced around the square. There were still people there at the edges. A man sitting on a bench with his phone out. A woman with a stroller paused near the tree line. They were watching, but no one was coming closer. No one ever did. "I have plenty of respect for law enforcement when it's done properly," Jasmine said, hating how her voice wavered slightly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I really need to go." She turned again, more firmly this time, and took 3 steps before she felt it. The tug on her skirt. Not hard enough to pull it down, but enough. Enough to violate, to demean, to remind her that in this moment with these men, her education and her profession and her dignity meant nothing at all. Jasmine stopped dead in her tracks. The sound of Donovan's laughter rang in her ears, joined by Collins's voice saying, "Oh man, did you see her face?" Time seemed to slow down. Jasmine could feel her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Heat flooded her face. That particular burning shame that comes not from doing something wrong, but from being treated like you're worth nothing, from being reduced to an object of mockery by people who were supposed to serve and protect. Her hands were shaking. She could feel tears trying to form behind her eyes, and she forced them back with everything she had. "Don't cry. Don't give them that. Don't you dare give them that." Behind her, the officers were still laughing, talking to each other like she wasn't even there. "Did you see the look on her face?" Collins was saying. "Priceless, man. Absolutely priceless." Something inside Jasmine shifted. It was like all the years of swallowing insults, of being professional in the face of disrespect, of taking the high road while others took the low. All of it crystallized into a single clear thought. No, not this time. Not today. She turned around slowly, her briefcase still in her hand, her mind shifting from victim to attorney. She'd spent 15 years in courtrooms. She knew the law inside and out. She knew her rights, and more importantly, she knew their limitations. She knew what they could and couldn't do. And she knew exactly how to make them regret this moment for the rest of their careers. Jasmine reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone with steady hands. The officers' laughter died down when they saw what she was doing. "What are you doing?" Donovan asked, his tone shifting from mockery to something harder. Jasmine raised the phone and started recording, her thumb firm on the button. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, every word deliberate. "My name is Jasmine Richardson. I'm a civil rights attorney licensed to practice in this state. The date is September 23rd and the time is approximately 6:45 p.m. I'm in the downtown square, and I've just been physically harassed by 2 police officers." "Hey, stop that," Collins said, moving toward her. "You can't record us." "Actually, I can," Jasmine said, her legal training taking over completely now, pushing away the fear and humiliation. "This is a public space, and I have every right to record this interaction." Officer Donovan, badge number 437, just tugged on my skirt while Officer Collins, badge number 592, laughed and encouraged this behavior. She could see the change in their faces now, the reality settling in. They'd thought this was just a game, just some fun at the expense of a woman they'd never see again. But now there was a camera, and there was a witness statement, and there was an attorney who knew exactly what to do with both. "That's not what happened," Donovan said quickly, his swagger evaporating. "We were just joking around." "Joking around," Jasmine repeated, still recording. "So you admit you made physical contact with me without my consent?" The officers looked at each other, and Jasmine could see them trying to figure out how to backtrack, how to make this go away. But it was too late for that. The moment they'd touched her skirt, they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Around the square, Jasmine noticed phones coming out. The man on the bench was definitely recording now. The woman with the stroller had stopped completely, her phone raised. There were others too. People who'd been pretending not to watch suddenly becoming witnesses. "Ma'am, I think you're overreacting," Collins said, trying a different approach. His voice had taken on that fake reasonable tone some people use when they're trying to calm down a situation they created. "Nobody meant any harm." "Whether you meant harm is irrelevant," Jasmine said. "What matters is that you, as sworn police officers, made unwanted physical contact with a civilian who was minding her own business. That you engaged in harassment while on duty, in uniform representing this police department." Donovan's face was getting red now. "Look, lady, I don't know what you think happened here, but you need to put that phone away before you find yourself in real trouble. Are you threatening me, Officer Donovan? Jasmine asked, making sure the phone captured his face clearly. Because that would be another violation to add to the list. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jasmine's hands weren't shaking anymore. Her breathing was steady. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd spent her entire career doing, standing up to people who thought they were untouchable, who thought their authority made them immune to consequences. "We're going to need you to come with us to the station," Collins said suddenly, his hand moving toward his belt. "You're causing a disturbance." Jasmine didn't move. "I'm not causing a disturbance. I'm standing peacefully in a public square, exercising my First Amendment right to record public officials performing their duties. If you attempt to detain me without probable cause, that's false arrest, and I will pursue every legal remedy available." The standoff continued. Three people locked in a moment that would change everything that came after. Jasmine could see the calculation in the officer's eyes, watching them weigh their options, trying to figure out how to save face. Behind them, she heard a new voice. "What's going on here?" A third officer had arrived, older, with sergeant stripes on his uniform. His eyes moved from Jasmine to the two officers and back again, and she could see him trying to read the situation. This was it. The moment when everything would either escalate or start to resolve. Jasmine lowered her phone slightly but kept recording. "Sergeant," she said calmly, "my name is Jasmine Richardson. I'm an attorney, and I've just filed a verbal complaint against these two officers for physical harassment and inappropriate conduct." The sergeant looked like he'd been on the force for at least 20 years. His face had that weathered quality of someone who'd seen too much and wanted to see less. When his eyes met Jasmine's, she saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe, or concern. It was hard to tell. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Williams," he said, his voice measured and professional. "Can you tell me what happened here?" Jasmine kept her phone steady, still recording. She'd learned long ago that the story changed depending on who was telling it, and she needed her version documented before anyone could twist it into something else. "I was walking through the square after leaving the courthouse," she began, keeping her voice level and clear. "Officers Donovan and Collins stopped me. They made comments about my appearance and my profession. When I attempted to leave, Officer Donovan physically grabbed my skirt while both officers laughed about it. Multiple witnesses observed this interaction and several people are currently recording." She gestured toward the square without taking her eyes off the sergeant. She could see him processing this information, see the slight tightening around his eyes. This wasn't what he'd expected to deal with tonight. "That's not what happened," Donovan jumped in, his voice loud and defensive. "We were just talking to her, being friendly, and she started getting aggressive. Started accusing us of things that never happened." Collins nodded quickly, backing up his partner. "She's making this whole thing up. We barely even touched her. She's just looking for a payday, probably. You know how these people are." Those last words hung in the air like poison. Jasmine felt the sting of them, the casual racism wrapped up in a phrase that sounded almost innocent if you weren't listening carefully. But she was listening. She was always listening. "These people," Jasmine repeated softly, making sure her phone caught it. "Can you clarify what you mean by that, Officer Collins?" His face went pale, realizing what he'd just said. "I didn't mean... I was talking about lawyers, people who sue cops." "Right," Jasmine said, not believing him for a second. "Just to be clear, for the record, you're now claiming that I'm fabricating this entire incident for financial gain?" Sergeant Williams held up his hand. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but you need to put the phone away so we can talk about this properly." "With respect, Sergeant, I don't need to do that," Jasmine replied. "I have every legal right to record this interaction. And I'm not upset. I'm filing a formal complaint about misconduct by officers under your command." The sergeant's jaw tightened. She could see him struggling with how to handle this. On one hand, he had two of his officers claiming nothing happened. On the other, he had a lawyer with a camera and witnesses, standing in a public square where anyone could see. "Look, Ms. Richardson," he started, trying a different approach. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. Sometimes things get taken the wrong way. Why don't you come down to the station with us and we can sort this all out in a more private setting?" Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere with any of you. I'll be filing my complaint through the proper channels. I'll also be contacting the Internal Affairs Division first thing tomorrow morning." "You're making a big mistake," Donovan said, his voice taking on a threatening edge. You really want to make enemies of the police department? You really want to see how hard your life can get? And there it was. The implicit threat that she'd known was coming. The reminder that they had power and she didn't. That they could make her life difficult in ways she couldn't even imagine. It was the same threat that kept so many people silent. That let misconduct continue because speaking up seemed more dangerous than staying quiet. But Jasmine had spent 15 years fighting against exactly this kind of intimidation. She'd stared down hostile judges and corrupt officials and men who thought their position made them untouchable. 2 police officers in a public square weren't going to scare her into silence. Did everyone hear that? She said, raising her voice slightly and looking around at the growing crowd of onlookers. Officer Donovan just threatened me for exercising my constitutional right to file a complaint. I want all of you to remember what you heard here tonight. The man on the bench who'd been recording stood up. I got it all on video, he called out. Every word. A woman from the crowd spoke up too. I saw what happened. I saw him pull on her skirt. It was completely inappropriate. More voices joined in. People who'd been silent before, who'd been watching from the edges, suddenly found their courage in numbers. They started moving closer, phones out, creating a circle of witnesses that the officers couldn't ignore or intimidate. Sergeant Williams looked around at the growing crowd, and Jasmine could see the calculation in his eyes. This was getting out of control. This was becoming a scene, the kind of thing that made the evening news and sparked community outrage. Everyone needs to disperse, he said loudly, trying to take control of the situation. This is official police business. If you don't leave the area, you'll be charged with interfering with an investigation. What investigation? Jasmine asked sharply. Am I under arrest? Am I being charged with a crime? Because if not, there's no investigation for these people to interfere with. These are citizens in a public space observing public officials. That's not a crime. She was in her element now, doing what she did best. The fear and humiliation from earlier had transformed into something else. Purpose. Determination. The same fire that had pushed her through law school, through the bar exam, through countless difficult cases. You need to stop lawyering at me, Donovan snapped, stepping closer. You think you're so smart? You think that degree makes you better than us? I think that degree means I know my rights, Jasmine shot back. And I know yours. I know exactly what you can and cannot do. I know that you've already crossed several lines tonight, and if you keep going, you're only going to make this worse for yourselves. Collins moved to flank her on the other side, and suddenly Jasmine was very aware of how vulnerable her position was. She was surrounded by 3 police officers, all of them bigger than her, all of them armed. The crowd was still there, still watching, but what could they really do if things got physical? Her heart started racing again, that primal fear cutting through the professional confidence. She'd heard too many stories, seen too many cases where things escalated, where a simple confrontation turned deadly. She thought about her parents, about her younger brother, about all the people who loved her and needed her. But she also thought about all the people who hadn't been able to stand up for themselves. All the victims she'd represented who came to her after the damage was done, wishing they'd said something, done something, fought back somehow. She thought about the next person these officers would harass if nobody stopped them. Sergeant Williams, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. I'm asking you as a supervisor to control your officers. I'm asking you to do your job and hold them accountable. Because if you don't, I promise you this won't end here. The sergeant stared at her for a long moment. She could see the conflict in his face. The struggle between protecting his own and doing what was right. It was a choice she'd seen people make 100 times before, and most of them chose their own. Officers Donovan and Collins stepped back, he finally said. Both officers looked at him in disbelief. Sarge, you can't be serious, Donovan protested. She's completely out of line here, I said. Step back, Williams repeated, his voice harder now. Both of you return to your vehicle. I'll handle this. They hesitated, clearly not wanting to back down, wanting to save face in front of the crowd. But eventually they moved away, throwing hostile glances at Jasmine as they went. The sergeant turned back to her, and his voice was quieter now. Ms. Richardson, I understand you feel you were mistreated. I'm asking you professionally to consider whether filing a formal complaint is really necessary. Sometimes these situations can be resolved more informally. Jasmine almost laughed. It was the same line she'd heard so many times before, dressed up in different words. Let it go, don't make waves. Give them a second chance. As if this was the first time. As if there weren't probably dozens of other people who'd let it go, who'd accepted the informal resolution and allowed the behavior to continue. No, she said simply. This needs to be on record. This needs to be investigated properly. Williams sighed heavily. You understand this is going to be difficult. It's going to be your word against theirs. These are good officers with clean records. Then the investigation should clear them, shouldn't it? Jasmine countered. Unless you're suggesting that the investigation won't be fair. Unless you're telling me that the system is designed to protect officers regardless of what they actually did. She could see she'd backed him into a corner with that one. He couldn't admit the system was rigged without indicting himself. But he also couldn't promise justice without potentially going against his own. I'm just trying to give you realistic expectations, he said carefully. I appreciate that, Jasmine replied. But I've been doing this work long enough to know exactly what to expect. I know how the system works. I know how these investigations usually go, and I'm prepared to see this through regardless. She paused, then added, I'm also prepared to contact the media, the ACLU, and every civil rights organization in the state. I'm prepared to make this public in ways that will force real accountability, because I can, Sergeant Williams. I have the resources and the knowledge and the platform to make sure this doesn't just disappear into some file cabinet. It wasn't a threat exactly. It was a statement of fact. She was telling him that she wasn't just some random person they'd harassed who would quietly go away. She was someone who could fight back, and she would. Williams pulled out a card from his pocket and handed it to her. This has the information for internal affairs. You can file your complaint there. I'll be writing up my own report about this incident. Jasmine took the card, studying it carefully. Thank you. I'll be curious to see what your report says happened here tonight. I'll write what I observed, he said neutrally. Which was a complaint being made by a civilian against 2 officers. The details of that complaint will be investigated by the appropriate department. It was a careful answer, one that committed him to nothing. Jasmine nodded slowly. I see. Well, I'll make sure to include in my complaint that you arrived after the initial incident, and that your officers denied any wrongdoing. She looked past him to where Donovan and Collins were standing by their patrol car, watching with angry faces. I'll also note that Officer Donovan made threatening statements to me about the consequences of filing this complaint. Ms. Richardson, Williams started, and now there was a hint of exasperation in his voice. I'm trying to help you here. No, you're not, Jasmine said, not unkindly. You're trying to help them. You're trying to make this go away as quietly as possible, and I understand that. They're your colleagues, maybe even your friends, but helping them means not helping me, and not helping the next person they decide to harass. She lowered her phone finally, stopping the recording. I'll be at Internal Affairs tomorrow morning when they open. I'll have this video, plus videos from at least 3 other witnesses. I'll have written statements, and I'll have my own testimony. If the investigation is fair and thorough, the truth will come out. Williams looked at her for another moment, then shook his head slightly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, Jasmine corrected gently. They made this hard when they decided to harass me. I'm just making sure there are consequences. She walked past him, heading toward where her car was parked. Her legs felt shaky now that the adrenaline was wearing off, but she kept her head high. Several people from the crowd approached her, asking if she was okay, offering to send her their videos, giving her their contact information in case she needed witnesses. The man from the bench caught up with her. Hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. That was completely wrong. Thank you, Jasmine said, meaning it. Thank you for recording. Thank you for speaking up. I've got a clear video of the whole thing, he said, pulling out his phone. Want me to send it to you? She gave him her email address, watching him type it carefully into his phone. As she did, she saw the video file come through. Proof of what had happened. Evidence that couldn't be disputed or denied. By the time she reached her car, she had videos from 5 different people, contact information from a dozen witnesses, and a fierce determination burning in her chest. The humiliation and fear from earlier had crystallized into something sharp and purposeful. She sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Tomorrow morning, first thing, she would file that complaint, and then she would make some calls to people she knew. People who could help. People who understood that this wasn't just about her. This was about every person who'd ever been harassed by someone in uniform and felt powerless to do anything about it. This was about changing a system that protected the powerful and ignored the vulnerable. Jasmine started her car and pulled out of the parking space. As she drove away from the square, she could see the patrol car still sitting there, the officers still watching. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see that she wasn't afraid, that she wasn't going to back down. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Jasmine didn't sleep much that night. She lay in bed replaying the incident over and over, thinking about all the things she could have said or done differently. But every time her mind went down that path, she stopped herself. No, she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd walked through a public square, and 2 officers had decided to harass her. That was on them, not her. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went to her home office. She opened her laptop and started drafting her formal complaint. Every detail needed to be precise. Every word mattered. She'd seen too many complaints dismissed on technicalities, on vague language or missing information. Hers would be airtight. She described the timeline of events, the exact words spoken, the physical contact. She listed the witnesses and attached the video files. She included the officers' badge numbers and their threatening statements. By the time the sun started rising, she had a 15-page document that laid out everything that had happened. At 8:30, she was showered, dressed, and standing outside the Internal Affairs office. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Another suit, this one charcoal gray, professional, serious. She wanted them to see her as what she was, an attorney who knew exactly what she was doing. The receptionist looked surprised to see someone waiting when she unlocked the door. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to file a formal complaint against 2 officers," Jasmine said, placing her folder on the desk. "I have documentation, video evidence, and witness statements." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Okay, let me get someone for you. Please have a seat." Jasmine sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, her folder on her lap. The office was plain, institutional. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a few posters about integrity and service. She wondered how many people had sat in these same chairs hoping for justice only to be disappointed. 20 minutes later, a detective came out. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. "Ms. Richardson, I'm Detective Palmer. Why don't you come back to my office?" She followed him down a hallway to a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. He gestured for her to sit. "So I understand you want to file a complaint," he said, pulling out a form. "I do." Jasmine handed him her folder. "This contains a detailed written statement, video evidence from multiple angles, and contact information for at least 12 witnesses." Palmer's eyebrows went up as he opened the folder. He started reading, and she watched his expression shift from casual interest to something more serious. He looked through the videos on the flash drive she'd included, his face impassive. "These are serious allegations," he said finally. "They're accurate allegations," Jasmine corrected. "Everything in that report is factual and can be verified." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're a lawyer?" "Civil rights attorney, yes. So you know how these investigations work." "I do," Jasmine said, "which is why I've made sure to document everything properly. I'm not going to make this easy to dismiss." Palmer almost smiled at that. "I can see that." He tapped the folder. "Okay, I'll open an official investigation. The officers will be interviewed. The witnesses will be contacted. This will take some time." "How much time?" "These things usually take several weeks, sometimes months." Jasmine had expected this. Internal investigations moved slowly, often deliberately so. People's memories faded. Witnesses became harder to reach. Public attention moved on to other things. "I understand," she said. "I'll be following up regularly." "I'm sure you will," Palmer said, not unkindly. "Look, Ms. Richardson, off the record. This kind of thing, it's hard to prove." "It becomes," she said, "even with video." "Off the record?" Jasmine leaned forward. "I have video of the physical contact. I have audio of the threatening statements. I have multiple witnesses. If your investigation can't find wrongdoing with that much evidence, then the problem isn't the evidence. It's the investigation." Palmer held up his hands. "I'm just being straight with you about the reality." "I appreciate that," Jasmine said, standing up. "But I've been in this reality my whole life. I know how it works." I also know that sometimes when enough pressure is applied, the system actually does work the way it's supposed to. She left the Internal Affairs office and sat in her car for a moment, gathering her thoughts. That was step 1 complete. Now for step 2. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. First to the ACLU, then to the local NAACP chapter, then to a community activist she'd worked with on previous cases. By lunchtime, she'd spoken to 8 different organizations, all of them interested in what had happened. Her phone started ringing before she even got home. A reporter from the local news station. Word was already spreading. "Ms. Richardson, I heard you filed a complaint against 2 police officers. Can you tell me what happened?" Jasmine took a breath. This was the moment. Once she went public, there was no taking it back. The department would close ranks. The officers would fight back. Her life would become complicated in ways she couldn't fully predict, but staying silent meant nothing would change. It meant Donovan and Collins would keep their badges and probably do the same thing to someone else. It meant the system would keep protecting abusers while ignoring victims. "Yes, I can tell you," she said, but not over the phone. "Can we meet?" 2 hours later, she was sitting across from reporter Linda Chen in a coffee shop downtown. Linda had her recorder out and a notepad filled with questions. "Walk me through exactly what happened," Linda said. Jasmine told the story again, the same way she'd written it in her complaint. The facts, clear and simple. Linda listened, occasionally asking clarifying questions, and Jasmine could see the reporter's interest growing. "And you have video of this?" Linda asked. "Multiple videos from multiple angles. I can provide you with copies." "This is a strong story," Linda said carefully, "but you know the department will push back. They'll say their officers did nothing wrong. They might even try to paint you as someone with an agenda against police." "I don't have an agenda against police," Jasmine said firmly. "I have an agenda against misconduct." "There's a difference." Linda nodded, making notes. "Have you experienced anything like this before with this department?" "No, this is my first direct incident. But in my work as a civil rights attorney, I've represented several clients who've had issues with excessive force and harassment. This department has patterns. Can you elaborate on that?" Jasmine chose her words carefully. "I can tell you that in the past 5 years, I've handled 3 cases involving this police department where my clients alleged inappropriate conduct. 2 were settled out of court. 1 is still pending." "Were any of those cases involving officers Donovan or Collins?" "No, but that's exactly my point. This isn't about 2 bad officers. This is about a culture that allows this behavior to continue." The interview went on for another hour. Linda asked tough questions, the kind a good reporter should ask. Jasmine answered them all honestly, never embellishing, sticking to the facts. By the time they finished, she felt drained but also relieved. The story was out there now. Linda's piece aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. Jasmine watched it with her parents, who'd come over as soon as they heard what happened. Her mother held her hand the whole time, squeezing tight during the parts where the video played showing Donovan tugging her skirt. "My baby," her mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." "I'm okay, Mom," Jasmine said, though her own eyes were wet. Seeing the incident again on television made it real in a new way. Thousands of people were watching this, seeing her humiliation, but also seeing her stand up for herself. Her father was quiet, his jaw tight with anger. "Those officers should be fired," he said finally. "What they did was disgraceful." The story ended with a statement from the police department. A spokesperson appeared on screen, reading from a prepared statement. "The department takes all complaints seriously. These allegations are currently under investigation by Internal Affairs. Officers Donovan and Collins remain on active duty at this time. We cannot comment further on an ongoing investigation." Jasmine's phone exploded with messages. Friends, colleagues, former clients, people she hadn't talked to in years, all of them expressing support, sharing their own stories, offering help. But there were other messages, too. Anonymous ones, ugly ones, telling her she was a liar, that she was trying to destroy good men, that she deserved what happened and worse. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. "Don't read those," her mother said gently, taking the phone from her. "Those people don't matter." "They do matter, though," Jasmine said, "because they're part of the problem. They see a video of a woman being harassed and they blame her instead of the harassers." Her father put his arm around her shoulders. "You did the right thing going public. I know it's scary, but you did the right thing." The next morning, Jasmine woke up to find her story had spread beyond the local news. Social media had picked it up. People were sharing the video, adding their own commentary, some supportive, some not. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine was trending in their city. She got to her office to find reporters waiting outside. They called out questions as she walked past. "Ms. Richardson, have you heard from the officers? Are you planning to sue? What do you want to happen?" She stopped at the door and turned to face them. "I want accountability. I want a real investigation. I want these officers to face consequences for their actions, and I want this police department to acknowledge that there's a problem and commit to fixing it." Inside her office, her assistant looked overwhelmed. "Your voicemail is full. I've had at least 50 calls already this morning. CNN wants an interview. So does the state attorney general's office." Jasmine sat down at her desk, looking at the mountain of messages and requests. This was bigger than she'd anticipated. The story had touched a nerve, sparked something in the community. She thought about trying to pull back to let this quiet down, but then she remembered the look on Donovan's face when he laughed after pulling her skirt. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. "Set up the interview with CNN," she said, "and get me the contact information for the Attorney General's office. If they're interested, let's see what they want to talk about." Over the next few days, more information started coming out. Other women began reaching out to Jasmine privately, telling her they'd had similar experiences with the same officers. A woman who'd been pulled over and had inappropriate comments made about her appearance. Another who'd called the police for help and ended up feeling unsafe because of how the officers spoke to her. A third who'd filed a complaint years ago that went nowhere. Jasmine documented every story, every detail. She created a timeline showing a pattern of behavior that went back years. And she shared this information with Detective Palmer, with the media, with community organizations. The police department issued another statement. "We are aware of additional allegations that have surfaced. All complaints are being reviewed as part of our ongoing investigation." But Jasmine noticed they still hadn't placed the officers on leave. They were still out there in uniform, carrying guns, with all the authority that came with the badge. She held a press conference on the courthouse steps, surrounded by the other women who'd come forward and several community leaders. The crowd that gathered was larger than she'd expected. People holding signs, "Justice now," "Believe women," "Hold police accountable." "This isn't just about what happened to me," Jasmine said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "This is about a pattern of behavior that's been ignored for too long. This is about a system that protects officers even when they abuse their power. And this is about all of us saying enough is enough." The woman who'd been pulled over spoke next, her voice shaking but determined. "I didn't report what happened because I didn't think anyone would believe me. But seeing Jasmine stand up gave me courage. We shouldn't have to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect us." One by one, the other women told their stories. The crowd grew quiet, listening. Some people were crying. Others looked angry, but everyone was paying attention. That evening, the police chief held his own press conference. He looked uncomfortable, reading from prepared remarks. In light of the serious allegations that have been brought forward, Officers Donovan and Collins have been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. It was a small victory, but an important one. The officers were off the streets, at least temporarily. The pressure was working, but Jasmine knew this was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead. Getting the officers fired, ensuring real consequences, changing the policies that had allowed this behavior to continue. That would take time, persistence, and a lot more courage. She went home that night exhausted but determined. Her mother had left food in her refrigerator, knowing she wasn't taking care of herself. Her father had installed a security camera at her front door, worried about the threatening messages. As she ate leftover soup at her kitchen table, Jasmine thought about everything that had happened in just 1 week. How one moment in a public square had turned into something much bigger than herself. How standing up, even when it was scary, even when it was hard, could inspire others to do the same. Her phone buzzed with another message. This one from Detective Palmer. "Need to speak with you. New developments in the investigation." Jasmine's heart raced as she read it. New developments could mean anything. Evidence they'd found, witnesses they'd interviewed. Or it could mean they'd found a way to dismiss the whole thing. She typed back, "I'm available tomorrow morning. Whatever came next." She was ready for it. Jasmine arrived at Detective Palmer's office at 9 o'clock sharp. She'd barely slept again, her mind racing through possibilities of what these new developments could be. Palmer was waiting for her, and this time he wasn't alone. A woman in a dark suit sat in the corner of the room, her expression serious. "Ms. Richardson, this is Agent Torres from the FBI's Civil Rights Division," Palmer said. Jasmine's eyebrows shot up. The FBI. This was bigger than she'd thought. She shook Torres's hand and sat down, her heart pounding. "Ms. Richardson," Torres began, "we've been monitoring the situation with your complaint. Based on what we've seen, we've opened our own investigation into potential civil rights violations within this police department." "The FBI is investigating?" Jasmine asked, wanting to make sure she understood correctly. "Yes. Your case brought several concerning patterns to our attention. Detective Palmer has been cooperating with us, sharing information from his internal investigation." Torres pulled out a folder. "What we've discovered is troubling. Officers Donovan and Collins have been the subject of 14 informal complaints over the past 4 years. 14? Jasmine felt her anger rising. "And they were still allowed to patrol?" Palmer shifted uncomfortably. "Those complaints were never formally filed. People would come in, talk about what happened, but then wouldn't follow through with the paperwork. Without formal complaints, there was nothing we could put in their personnel files. Or so we were told," Torres added. "What we found is that some people did try to file formal complaints. Those complaints were either discouraged by supervisors or mysteriously lost in the system." Jasmine leaned forward. "You're saying this was covered up?" "We're saying there's evidence of systematic failure to properly investigate misconduct," Torres said carefully. "Sergeant Williams, who responded to your incident, has been supervising Donovan and Collins for 3 years. During that time, he received at least 6 complaints about them. None were properly investigated. The pieces were falling into place. The sergeant's attempt to get her to drop it, his defensive posture, his claims that these were good officers with clean records. He'd been protecting them all along." "There's more," Palmer said, and he looked genuinely upset now. "We found records showing that both officers had been flagged during their initial training for concerning attitudes toward women and minorities. Those flags were noted but not acted upon. They should never have been cleared for solo patrol." Jasmine sat back processing this. The harassment she'd experienced wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that stretched back years, enabled by supervisors who looked the other way and a system that valued protecting its own over protecting the public. "What happens now?" she asked. "The FBI will continue its investigation," Torres said. "We're looking at not just the 2 officers, but at the supervisory chain and the policies that allowed this to happen. We're also reaching out to everyone who filed or attempted to file complaints." "And criminally?" Jasmine asked. "Will Donovan and Collins face charges?" Torres met her eyes. "Based on what we have so far, yes. We're building a case for deprivation of rights under color of law. That's a federal crime. If convicted, they could face significant prison time." It was what Jasmine had wanted, but hearing it made it real in a way that was almost overwhelming. These officers might actually face real consequences. Not just losing their jobs, but criminal charges. "Federal charges. How can I help?" she asked. "Keep doing what you're doing," Torres said. "Your willingness to go public to fight this openly has made other victims feel safe enough to come forward. We now have 9 women willing to testify about their experiences with these officers. That's powerful evidence of a pattern." After the meeting, Jasmine walked out into the bright morning sunshine feeling like the world had shifted somehow. The FBI was involved. Real accountability was possible. But there was also a weight to it, knowing how many other women had been through similar experiences, how long this had been going on. Her phone rang. It was Attorney Chen, a colleague she'd worked with on several civil rights cases. They'd become friends over the years, bonding over their shared commitment to justice. "Jasmine, have you seen the news this morning?" Chen asked. "No, I was in a meeting." "What happened?" "The police union held a press conference. They're defending Donovan and Collins, saying they're the victims of a witch hunt, that you're trying to destroy their careers over a harmless interaction." Jasmine felt her stomach drop. She'd known this was coming, but it still hurt to hear. "What exactly did they say?" "They showed up with the union president and about 20 officers standing behind them in uniform. Very intimidating visual. They claimed you're anti-police, that you've made a career out of suing law enforcement and that this whole thing is blown out of proportion. Did they mention the other women who came forward? They said those women are just jumping on the bandwagon looking for attention or money. They're trying to discredit everyone. Chen paused. Jasmine, they also released your work history. Every case you've ever handled involving police misconduct. They're framing you as someone with an agenda. Jasmine closed her eyes, leaning against her car. This was the playbook. Attack the victim's credibility. Make it about her character instead of their actions. Paint her as an opportunist instead of a person seeking justice. I expected this, she said quietly. But it doesn't make it easier, I know. But here's the thing. The public isn't buying it. Social media is actually pushing back hard against the union. People are posting about how your work history proves you're credible, not that you have an agenda. They're saying, of course, a civil rights attorney would handle police misconduct cases. That's literally your job. That made Jasmine feel slightly better, but she knew the battle for public opinion was just beginning. That afternoon, she received a call from the mayor's office. The mayor wanted to meet with her personally. Jasmine agreed, curious about what this meant. Mayor Patricia Brennan was a practical politician who'd managed to stay in office for 2 terms by reading the public mood and responding accordingly. When Jasmine entered her office, the mayor stood and shook her hand warmly. Ms. Richardson, thank you for coming. Please sit down. Jasmine sat, studying the mayor's face. She'd dealt with politicians before and knew how to read between the lines. I want you to know that I take what happened to you very seriously. The mayor began. No one should be treated that way, especially not by officers sworn to protect and serve. I appreciate that, Jasmine said carefully. I've been briefed on the FBI investigation. I understand there are significant concerns about how complaints have been handled in our police department. The mayor folded her hands on her desk. I want to make changes, real changes, but I need your help. What kind of help? I'm forming a civilian oversight committee for the police department. People from the community who can review policies, investigate complaints independently, and make recommendations for reforms. I'd like you to be part of that committee. Jasmine considered this. It was a good sign that the mayor was taking action. But she'd seen these oversight committees before. Sometimes they had real power. Sometimes they were just for show, a way to calm public anger without actually changing anything. What authority would this committee have? She asked. Full access to personnel files, complaint records, and investigation reports. The ability to conduct independent investigations and make binding recommendations for disciplinary action. Binding? Jasmine pressed. So if the committee recommends an officer be fired, they get fired? The mayor hesitated. The committee's recommendations would carry significant weight. The police chief would have to publicly justify any decision to go against them. So not truly binding, but not powerless either. It was better than nothing. I'll consider it, Jasmine said, but I want to see the actual proposal in writing. The scope of authority, the committee structure, everything, and I want community input on who serves on this committee. It can't just be people the mayor's office approves of. Brennan smiled.